This is Alicia Riverall, and I'm with Edwin Daniels. Someone called you Red. Is that your nickname? Red Daniels? Edwin Red Daniels. And we're at the Corsound Waterfowl Museum on Harker's Island, and today's date is August 4th, 2000. This is my tape number 8400ED.1. And we'll be talking about Corsound Waterfowl Museum's exhibits and also about Mr. Daniels' model boat building traditions. Okay, Mr. Daniels, let's start with the Corsound area. What you would define as down east.
Well, we always called down east Atlantic and Cedar Island, those areas down there, because the people we heard referring to down east were people from Beaufort. We didn't travel that much, so the people from Beaufort were always talking about down easters. They'd refer to Cedar Islanders, Atlanticers, sea level as down easters. But now anything east of Raleigh, I guess is called down east. If you see it on TV, they talk about the weather down east, and that includes areas of Hyde and Pamlico County. But the true down east is I think from North River east, is my opinion. That's down east. When you cross North River Bridge and head on towards Cedar Island, further you go, the more down east you're getting.
Yeah. What about, what does down east mean to you as a place?
To me, it's the most beautiful place in the world. Even with the mosquitoes and everything, it's still the most beautiful place in the world. Where can you go and get in a boat and go out and see nature just as it is? I mean, things are pretty much the same as they were, I'm sure, centuries ago. Thanks to the Park Service, this area has not been developed much over on that Outer Banks. You can go over there, and of course the hurricanes have made some changes in it, but it's really pretty out there, and there's still a lot of places to go, like if you want to go through the Salters Creek Canal, that looks like something that you would see in Brazil or somewhere like that I can imagine it'd be like that. It's a canal that's dug through down near sea level that goes out to Long Bay, and it's 2 or 3 miles through there, and in the summertime when it's so hot everywhere else you go through there, and these big trees is loaded with vines, grapevines and ivy and stuff, and those trees are covering, making an umbrella like over that canal, and it's always cool in there, real nice in there. That's a good experience. But you go out around those islands, like down at the very end of Corsound, where Corsound and Pamlico Sound intersect, they have 4 islands across there, named Chainshot Island and Harbor Island, Wainwright's Island, and Shell Island. At one time, I have read that Corsound was a lake. It was landlocked where those islands are. It's probably true because the water is shallow all the way across except 2 places, Harbor Island Channel, which was a natural channel there, and then the one that they are trying to maintain, the Corps of Engineers tries to maintain it as a boat channel, is Wainwright's. They dredge that to there, and the rest of it is shallow enough in between that you can actually wade without going over your head out there, and it's just shoals across there. So at one time that was made a lake, but those islands are pretty. They have like on Harbor Island is the remains of a hunting club that was built there back towards the 1st of the century, I believe, and now only part of one wall is standing. The hurricanes have ravaged the place until the island itself is probably less than a half acre. At one time it was a right big island, and people, a bunch of rich folks had that, and they maintained it as a hunting club, and there was so many geese and ducks down in that area back in those days, and they had what they call sink boxes where they would sit. Had the local guys from down at Cedar Island, Hog Island, which was inhabited at that time. Those native people were hired to act as guides for these people. and as caretakers for the club, everything. So there's a lot of history in there. Then over on the Outer Banks from there, where the Shell Island, right where it hits the Outer Banks, there's a place called Pillanterry's. And Pillanterry's was a huge hunting club. President Franklin D. Roosevelt hunted there at one time. That was before he was president, of course. As a young man, he had hunted there with these people that owned it. And that washed away in 1933, the hurricane. They had another clubhouse near Drum Inlet that washed away. I don't remember who owned that. But the area, in answer to your question, what it means to me, if I never went past Morehead City again, I wouldn't miss anything. I don't feel it. I was gone from home for 4 years in the Air Force, and all I could long for was to get back down there and let those mosquitoes bite me one more time. It really, I would rather to have been down there letting mosquitoes bite me than sitting in the nicest theater in the world watching the best show in the world, because that was my entertainment. Was out there, I could get in a skiff and pole out with it and set a mullet net, take some mullets on to it, gather some oysters. They were plentiful back then. And it was just everything that I wanted. My horizons didn't extend that far.
Mm-hmm. Everything you wanted was right here.
Everything was here and in abundance. And the people, absolutely the friendliest people that you'll find anywhere. It's changed because everything changes. It's not quite like I can remember as a youngster, because we have a lot of outside influence in here now. We have, I mean, when I grew up, I'd take my two hands, my fingers on my two hands, and give you the family names of 90% of the families from Beaufort East. 10 names would probably cover 90% of them. Daniels, Steins, Morrises, Willises, Fulchers, Davises, and people of this day. That was Goodwins, you don't forget them. And it would cover 90% of those people. But now you have, I mean, there's names that people don't even know how to pronounce.
Right.
But that started in World War II. When World War II started, they built a lot of soldiers, and they built those two Marine bases, one at Cherry Point and one over at Atlantic. And those people from north, most of them, come down to this area, and they married a lot of our local girls.
Yeah. What
world has happened.
Yeah. Well,
they liked it.
Didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
What about the traditions that define and make the Down East area what it is?
Well, to make it unique.
Yeah, the traditions over the generations.
Well, like I said, for one thing, it was the cohesion of the people. They had nothing but each other, really. There wasn't a whole lot of material things back when. I'm talking about when I grew up. There was not a whole lot of material things. We were poor, but we didn't know it. We had something to eat, a place to sleep, and that's really all the life we knew anything about. And we had no electricity where I was raised. We had no indoor bathroom facilities. Naturally, we had a dirt road, which was, I would say, a portion of the time was impassable. We had tide waters. We had storms and things that come over. But it was just different. Whenever anything happened, whenever a tragedy happened, people jumped in and helped each other. When I was a child, my dad could be out in his garden, which we always had to maintain a vegetable garden, as well as eating fish and oysters and things. But he'd be out in the garden to work, and here would come an old man be walking. I say old man. I mean a man be walking up there, one of the fishermen, and maybe there'd be a couple other people, one like walking behind or something, and he'd say, I want you to come help me get my boat up. They had no waves or anything. They had some poles there for skids And he said, all right. He'd lay his hoe down, go with the man. They go up there and take a dozen of those men. They're very strong men. They'd go there and they'd help the man pull his boat up. There were 21-foot boats and they were heavy built. Those pound-inch skids they had back then. They'd help him get his boat up, get it turned over so he could work on it. And someday, some guy would say, look, I need to put a roof on my house. Everybody would jump in and help him put the roof on the house. You didn't have hire people to do things. Your neighbors helped you do it, and you helped them. When someone was sick, there was always people to come in. There was 2 or 3 of the women on the island. I know one in particular, Miss Ola Goodwin, was she was a maybe fighter's nurse. She was.
What, can you repeat? You said there was one woman. Did you say what her name was?
Iola Goodwin.
Iola Goodwin.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was always there for when someone was sick. She seemed to be one of the best nurses, and I think her kind nature, her demeanor, had a lot to do with the healing also. As far as her medical knowledge, I don't know how much medical knowledge she had, but they'd always holler, go get Iola when somebody was real sick. And then when childbirth come or something, when the mother, I had an aunt there, an old maid aunt named Evadine Day, Evadyne, Evadine Day, and Aunt Evadine has been the one that changed the first diapers on more babies on Cedar Island than anyone I know back in my generation.
Was she a midwife?
No, she wasn't a midwife, but she was just somebody that was always there to help anybody. And there was no money involved. She would just go up there and just stay with them. If they had 50 cents they wanted to give her, that was fine, but it wasn't for money. She was that kind of person, real kind, and try to help them out. And of course, the mother had to stay in bed for 9 days after the childbirth. You couldn't walk. Had to stay in that bed for 9 days after childbirth. And then she had a time walking because she forgot how to walk, I think. But,
wow. So those are the kinds of qualities, it sounds like.
That was the qualities in those people.
Yeah.
As for making a living, I know my dad fished pound nets with a gentleman, his cousin on there, Mr. Levi Goodwin. And Mr. Levi and his wife, Miss Liddy, had 3 children. One of them was a Navy nurse, and one was a telephone operator in Newbern, and older son went to sea. He was a tugboat, later a tugboat captain, Harold. But they were real good people, and my dad fished with him, and I know one time that he just give Dad the money, what there was. They made so little. He said, here, you got a family to feed. He just gave him it. They work all week. They'd had to get up mornings so early to go out and fish those nets to get there before the cormorants. You know what the cormorants are, the birds. They would go in a pound net, and if after daylight, the cormorants would go to that pound net, and what fish they didn't eat, they would run out. So the fishermen had to get up like 2 o'clock in the morning, and those boats were slow, those little put motors in them, and they'd have to get to those nets at first light and fish them.
What was that last part? I missed that. About going at first light?
They had to be to those nets at first light.
Right.
So they left home like 2 o'clock in the morning to be there. And you just had to be ahead of those birds if you were going to get anything to eat. But there was times that they just couldn't catch any fish in those pound nets. And it was always fish for breakfast, pan trout like this, you know, really just a little bit. They had 2 sizes in the trout. They had what they call a pan trout and a round trout. The pan trout was anything under 1 pound, and the round trout were, you know, over a pound or better. And the pan trout, the smaller ones, my dad would bring them home and always bring some ice from off the fish boat. The guy that bought the fish, he'd have blocks of ice on there, so we'd get a chunk of ice so we'd have some iced tea. But we'd have those fish for breakfast, and usually be like 8 o'clock in the morning before we get to eat and you get home. And then you had to get out there, and we did our fertilizing with menhaden, small menhaden. the Indians passed along that tradition to the people here, and my dad would dig a trench alongside of his vegetable rows, and I'd have to take and place these fish along that trench, then he'd come along and take the coat and cover them up. And this was something that had to be done. We couldn't buy fertilizer. If we did, we bought a thing called guano. It was bird droppings come from down to somewhere down in the Caribbean area. Where was it? Guano Island, isn't it? Down near Trinidad or Abaca, somewhere down in that area.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was made of millions of, they say, of years of, I've read of, for the birds that roost on it, and they went down and mined this, and that stuff isn't. That's where they get the name of gunny sack. You remember the sacks that they had it in? God, that was what a terrible smell, man. 200-pound bags that stuff come in. But my dad never bought much guano. Never had that kind of money.
So he was a pound net fisherman. What were the livelihoods and traditions that people carried on that were really central to this area?
Well, the pound net fishing was what was in when I was a little boy. I was a very frail child, and I dreaded growing up because I just couldn't imagine having to manhandle those huge stakes and to lift those heavy
Pound netting, serious.
pound nettings. They used coal tar mixture, and they put it in big vats and build a fire under it and boil it and put those nets in there to dip them, to preserve them. You understand that?
Yeah.
And it takes a heck of a man to lift that. I'm telling you, they're strong guys, and they had to be to lift all it. I was such a frail little fellow, I was ready to grow up. I said, I'll never be able to fish. And I couldn't see past, how was I going to get away from there, you know? I mean, where was I going? What was I going to do? But that was the fishing. And then they had mullet nets, and they fished for mullets. But shrimping didn't start until, let's see, I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I would say it was 1935 or 36, first time I ever saw any shrimpers. I was laying in bed one morning, and you know, there's only about 3 or 4 cars on the entire island, and I could hear one start. Of course, I had good hearing, and I knew whose automobile it was. But I heard unusual noises that morning. It just got daylight good, and I could hear noises, and then I could hear something, and I didn't know what it was making such a noise. I'd seen 2 airplanes, I think, before, and they made a noise similar to that. But what it was these boats and people that Davis had developed a trawl rig. And they had those small boats with car engines in them, and they were down there shrimping. And they come in that bay, and they were getting aground, and it was a propeller coming out of the water racing. It was making all that noise. And my older brother went down there, waded out to one of the guys, a fellow named Bill Davis. And Bill says he was one of the first shrimpers I ever saw him. He was one of them.
One of the first in
the area?
About
a dozen of the boats, yes, but Bill was the first. I think his dad was the one that had made that net, made those nets. But Bill asked him, said, "Son, do you know where all the shoals are in this bay?" He said, "Sure, know where every one is." He said, "Well, how about getting on here with me?" And he said, "I'll give you some shrimp." Well, who wanted shrimp, you know? That's another story I'll tell you in a minute. But anyhow, when my brother got on the boat with him and worked with him both that morning until probably sometime mid-morning or later, they got what they wanted. They left. They had caught an old galvanized bucket out there, and it had holes in it, so naturally some fishermen had thrown it overboard. He gave my brother that bucket full of shrimp. He took them home, and my mother fixed them, but she cautioned us, don't tell anybody that we ate shrimp, because there's one old man over there that would eat shrimp, and people laughed at him. They thought he was gross, eating shrimp, you know, because there was an abundance of those things, but everybody thought they were like worms or something, so just old bugs or something. But we ate, my mother fixed those things, and I thought that was the best food I'd ever eat. And she says, don't tell anyone. Well, I had to tell my buddy Alden. I says, I've got to tell Alden about this. So I told Alden about eating those shrimp. I said, they were so good. He said, oh my God, don't tell me you people eat those things. I said, yes, we did. I said, but I'm not supposed to tell it. I'm not supposed to tell it, but Alden hadn't done. And by golly, that's the first time I ever ate shrimp. Huh. So Cedar Island people didn't really get into shrimping until after World War II. All those boys come back and they had to have something to do, so they started buying and building boats. That lasted for about 4 or 5 years. When I left to go into service in 1950, I think there was a dozen or more of those shrimp boats around Cedar Island. And when I come back from the service 4 years later, there was about 2 was free, was all was left there. The others had sold them and got out of it. Shrimping got where it wasn't all that good anymore, so they got out of the shrimp business. Now they have some quite nice boats on there. They probably got 7 or 8 of those fishermen are doing that now. But,
so when you're talking about pound nets, mullet, and shrimping, are you talking Cedar Island specific, or
yes,
down east as a whole? Cedar
well,
Island specific?
well, now I'm talking Cedar Island now because that's where I grew up.
Right.
The people to Atlantic and Davis and think they shrimped. They started that shrimping in I'd say 35, 37, something along in that area. I was a small boy. I know it was after the 1933 hurricane. That's, I can say, pre-hurricane and later, you know. But anyhow, the people in Atlantic, there's a lot of them that did shrimp all the time. They had what they call long haul rigs. You ever heard of the long haul net? Well, the long haulers hauled for a long time. I ran what they call a rum boat, go out and haul the fish in for the Clayton Fulcher Seafood Company for 2 years. 1948, 1949, I ran a boat. And my dad operated a boat for Clayton Fulcher to haul fish in from Cedar Island. And the pound net fisherman, he ran that boat from 1944 until, I guess, probably 1948, 49, something like that. Yep.
So then you too did work in fishing for a time.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Yes, for well, not as a fisherman. I did some shrimping with my dad. 47, 48, 49, a little bit of shrimping, but I was never much of a fisherman. I left down there and went to the Air Force because there was nothing to do. There was oysters. You can't believe. I doubt you have ever seen oysters like Crew or down Cedar Island. I don't believe there's anywhere ever that they raise oysters like it. The oysters would be like, you could open one and it would be as large, the meat itself would be as large as like a stick of butter.
Wow.
They would be as long as my foot. Some of them, they grow like 2 and 3 in a bunch on those white shoals out there. But there was no market for them most of the time. That was the big thing with the seafood, was we didn't have markets as such. And now they've got somebody begging for those truckers are in here all the time, and there's a ready market for anything you can catch out of the water. But the market was the big problem that we had when I was growing up. But when I got ready to go in the Air Force, I was 21 years old, and I didn't have a nickel, I didn't have a cigarette. I loved to smoke, I didn't have a cigarette. And it was in January, and this friend of mine had been in the Air Force. Linwood Goodwin down there, he'd been an ordnance man in the Air Force, and he said, armaments man. And he said, listen, you and I joined the Air Force. I said, I don't care. But I couldn't imagine putting 4 years away from my native place down there. And he joined me. And my brothers, I had a brother in the parachutes and one in the Navy, and they told me if I ever went into service to be a cook. Says those cooks have got it made. And all I could think about was, one time I want to sit down and eat all the peaches, the canned peaches, and all the ice cream that I want. One time in my life. I got in the Air Force and they wanted to send me to mechanic school. I didn't want to go to mechanic school. I wanted to be a cook. And they asked me why, and I tried to explain that do you know how to cook? I said, no, I don't. But I don't know how to work on airplanes either.
Right.
So I did. I cooked in the Air Force for 4 years, enjoyed it the most. Because besides working in the mess halls, I have part-time jobs most of the time into NCO clubs, cooking clubs at night. And it was a good experience. I got some good cooking experience out of it.
What'd you do for your livelihood once you got home?
Well, when I came back home, they had the best year, up to that time, the best year they'd ever had shrimping, 1953. I got home in October of 53 and got on a boat with my dad and went shrimping. We shrimped until Christmas week. And we made good for, back in those days, we made like anywhere from $70 to $90 each a week, which was good. That was good money, you know.
Yeah.
And the last week we went was Christmas week. Christmas, I think, was on Friday. We went Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we shared $44. I never forget that. And that was, we were shrimping out of Old Drum Inlet down there in the ocean. And the next year we went out and we were broke down continuously. There was something
You broke down what?
The engine was broke down, or something would happen every time. And finally, in I believe it was in June, sometime in June, or maybe it was early July, we had a hard northeast wind come, and those shrimp, we could hear people talking on the radio and say they were catching shrimp out there. And we went. And as we went out back of Harbor Island in that area and hit Pamlico Sound, we put our tri-net. That's a sample net you put over. Right. And our net, usually if you catch a dozen shrimp in a tri-net, you get some. But we had like 80 in that thing. Next time, I don't know, there's so many in it. Daddy says, put it over. And we put that thing over and start dragging. We get out there, and directly the line starts going together. That shows you got a lot of weight in that net. We pulled in, we had so many, all you could see was these reddish, orange colored legs on them. You know, the shrimp were on the move, and that type shrimp. Nice, good shrimp. And we went to raise that tail back up. We must have had 200 or 300 pounds of shrimp in that thing. And the rings pulled out here. They just, the end, you know, the rings where it holds the tail back together. Yeah. And the rings split out. And there went those shrimp just going every which way.
What a shame.
Then to compound that, we get the net back over, and then the engine started blowing oil out and right. It was a marine engine up around where the generator seal was. Started blowing the oil out of it. We couldn't keep any oil in it. And I told him, we went to Atlantic, went to the dock. I told him, I said, this is it. I quit. So I went job hopping. I went from job to job to job, everywhere I could get a job. And last, I got a job as a chef over at the hotel, the Taylor Brothers at Sea Level. I don't know if you ever heard of them, the ones that built the Sea Level Hospital and the Sea Level Inn and all that. They bought a hotel, 100-room hotel in Morehead City. And this was in 1957, they bought that. And they spent a lot of money on it and had that thing. Oh, it was the most beautiful thing, and it made a convention hotel. They didn't have one. They didn't have anything developed out on that banks. They have one hotel out there on Atlantic Beach called the Ocean King, and that it was made out of cement blocks, and that thing had split, the sides of it had, and eventually it burned down. But that was the only hotel, big hotel they had down this area. And they got a real good manager down there, and he would book like sheriff's conventions for all these organizations, and they hired me as a chef in there, and I worked, I think, about the hardest I worked in my life. I run that kitchen that summer, and I got a call to go to Cherry Point to that apprentice school. I had applied for that naval apprentice school. Right. And I got a chance to go in there the 8th of September 1958. I went to that apprentice school, and I didn't leave. I stayed at Cherry Point until I retired in 1985.
Wow, yeah.
And that was good. My family fared a lot better than they would have if I'd been on fishing or something. But
and was that pretty common at that time to start moving into service industry or Cherry Point because of the fishing industry?
Well, the fishing industry has, since I've known, the fishing has, we've had good years, we've had bad years. These scientists will tell you that such and such a type fishery is stressed and all this, but the way I've seen it, it'll take care of itself if they leave it alone. I think the more they mess with it, the more of a mess they make. However, I got sense enough to know that you can literally destroy anything too, but I think they got too many regulations. It's too much going on out there. Too much harassment for the fishermen. I don't know. It's just, it don't seem right to me. I think it'd be better if they would let the fishermen have more input in what the marine fisheries does.
I've heard a number of people say that.
Yeah, the fishermen should have more input in that, and I don't know. It's just not. It's just not right. It's not helping the fishermen.
Yeah.
Anything.
Let me ask you this: how can the museum represent the kinds of stories that you've just told me? How can the museum kind of make the culture and history of this area come alive for people?
What would you want to history? Like displays and things?
Yeah. What kinds of exhibits should they have up at the museum?
Well, they can have those. Well, first of all, I'm not a member of that museum of that this thing, and so I don't really know what I put in there. Their primary concern is with hunting and decoys.
Right, but they also...
But if they want to put a lot of things like the fishermen, like everything, I think they could put, they could have static displays like of duck hunting blinds, have the duck hunting blinds there and how they're fitted out and everything. Small displays, you know. They could have things of where the mid-Hayden fishermen, they could have, just like showing you a boat. You could have a boat there with your small boats out, show just how they're making these sets, and maybe have a tape recording, which they do have a tape recording over at Beaufort in the Mariners Museum. But they can have something sort of tell people what these fishermen are doing. They can have a display of mullet fishermen, which is that is one of the most exciting things. You ever been mullet fishing?
No, I haven't.
Now, you would enjoy that. When you get right overboard out there with that nets, fishing shallow water, you know, you get overboard and you pull those nets up, those mullets are jumping. It's the only fish we have that, well, it's the most, jumps the most of any fish. Mackerel, naturally, and trout and blues do jump under certain conditions, but this doggone thing, it's just natural for him to jump. So if you get a net full of fish.
And is that fishing off the stern or the fishing off the
well,
side of the boat?
What we do is put the net out in a circle around the fish. You see the mullet, you see them.
Right.
And
so a little like with the Menhaden.
Put a circle. Just go down with your net, put your net around, and then you take and get overboard and catch your toe in the bottom line of that net and keep dragging it with your toe, walking towards the staff, where you stick the staffs down, where your net comes together, until you get it into like a clover leaf or something. And then the fish, they jump from one place to another. You had to tighten them up so they'll mash in the net. And those things will jump. They had the biggest time. You would enjoy that.
And do they have a particular type of net that's used for mullet as opposed to other kinds?
Yeah. It's most of the time a mullet net is usually probably 30, 40 mashes deep. It's you go by the size of the net according to the time in the season. Early in the season, I've known them to use 1.25 inch mash net. That's 2.5 stretch. But that's a lot of small fish, you know. So it has, you can't sell all that many of them. Could get some to eat. But about 1.5 inches is when the mullet's long. That's in June. Then early June, we'll start getting up about 1.5 inch size. And then, like right now, used to we catch them to be like we'd use 1 5/8 inch stretch net. I mean, not 1 5/8 inch net, but anyhow, later on, those mullets start getting a roux in them. I don't know if you're aware.
They start getting a what?
A roux. The eggs in them.
Right. Okay.
And the last of September, those mullets are getting like they use 1 3/4 inch and 2 inch nets, like 4 inch stretch nets.
So they have to adjust the mash size
according to the season, to how the mullet is groomed.
Right.
Now, when they get up, the mullet starts out like, I don't know what they're getting, probably 40, 50 cents a pound for them, like now. But in the last of September, up until about the 1st of November, I guess, yeah, but all of October and up in November is when the real mullet season is. Now those mullets school up then, and they migrate. They head south. Mullets, they head south when they hard. Well, they call it mullet blues, and you have a hard northeast wind, and it's always been noted as a mullet blue. And back before we had the communications that we got now, it was hard to know the difference in a hurricane and a mullet blue until it was on you, you know. But when the mullet blue comes, those fish they'll head south. And that's when these huge haul nets they use around Carter's Island and down the Solar Path, they work off of the beach. They take dories and load those nets out and pull them in, and they catch.
Are those the long haul?
No, that's not the long haul. The long haul boat has two boats attached to it out in the sound, and they pull a mile of net, one on each end, just tug it until they get to the shoal and then pull it together.
Yeah.
But this one, they just have a net set out in a bow shape. They put a set of anchor out in the back of it, and then have a line run from that anchor, from the head of the anchor to the shore. Let them sit there, sit against the tide, you know, where the tide is. And when those fish, they can see them when they start jumping and stuff. They'll take a tractor or manpower and pull that line ashore and then pull it on the beach.
I think I've heard of that having been done up in the Chesapeake a long time ago. What is that style of fishing called here? What he just described.
Just mulleting is all I know.
From the shore, though.
Yeah, mulleting.
So the mulleting is happening from the shore.
I don't know what they call it. I don't know. I've never done it. I've seen it, but I never. But the way we mullet fish down there, we sit always in a circle around them and catch those huge mullets. And in the past, the fishermen would take and split those mullets, and you put the sides on, fillet them off, take the fillets and salt them. I mean, put them in a brine in wood kegs like that, and the roe was salted for like 3 or 4 hours, and then taken out, rinsed off, and sun dried, and it's good. I mean, I really like it. I really like that. But it's expensive. It's so expensive now. But
are those nets set? Are the mullet nets set from the shore? Is that what you were describing, or are those set from the boat?
They over here on the beach. They down the Solar Path. They set them. They have a dory on a trailer, and they go out. They launch through the breakers, go out and put it in a circle, and they pull to go in a half circle out, you know, sort of a crescent shape for that net, and then they put an anchor down in the back of it, hold the net, but in the head of the anchor, they put the prongs anchor in. They tie a rope, and they bring that rope to shore like 100 yards down the beach, and secure that rope. And when they get ready to pull the net in, they pull that rope, and that drags that end of the net in. The other end of it's already on the shore. You follow me?
Yes.
You start at the shore, start setting the net when you go out with the boat, and drag it in. Well, now that's the way they haul those. That's the haul net rig. Now the way they fish down there out of the boat, you just run around them in a circle. Put a circle net around them.
So you can do it either way.
Either way.
Yeah. Okay. Because I have heard of that style up in the Chesapeake, but I think they called it something a little different.
Probably do, and they probably got a name for it here, but I can't recall what.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: how would the museum? So what you were saying was showing displays of the fishing. How could they show mullet fishing, for instance?
Well,
to give
I guess
viewer a sense of that,
like a model of a boat, and have a glass sort of water like in it, net and things around them. Just a table display, it would be.
So a model display with you said before an audio tape.
Yeah,
audio.
Would talk about
you
definitely want to audio tape. So.
What other ideas do you have for how the museum? I should pull this out of the water here. The rain.
Yeah.
What other ideas do you have for how the museum could represent Cedar Island traditions?
I don't know. I don't know. Most of it there was like pound netting. They could have a display of a pound nets. Yeah.
Right.
That would be an easy one to make. Because my brother's made a pound net like that. And
Right.
Like it. Yeah. That's an easy thing for to do. The pound netting, incidentally, as I was telling you before, the pound netting went out. The old time pound netting was that went out back in the let's see, probably 40s, late 40s,
wow.
50s, early 50s. They quit setting. They just about quit it. One or two people just.
Are there a couple people who still do it here?
Well, no, but what I'm saying, they quit doing it. Then they started catching flounders in these pound nets. Now it's the biggest fish in the world down there.
Wow.
Pound netting is back. The pound netting come back about, I say, 20 years ago. They started getting big in this thing. They set those nets in early September. They stay out until Thanksgiving. And those flounders are also migrate. I don't know where they go, or they come in for. I don't know if they're coming in for something or leaving the sound. But in Pamlico Sound, Anchor Sound is a good place. And if you were to go out there in a boat, like in September, you would wonder how these small boats get through, because you can follow the channels. They can't set a pound net in the main channel, but these people don't run the channel in our small boats. Most of the boats that the people use now, like the mullet fishermen, the clammers, and everything, they use outboard boats. And you get up on a shoal, like you run for like 1.5 feet or 2 feet of water, and the boats are clean, a lot better than like in deep water, and it's a lot calmer in there, and that's the way they run. And you wonder how they can get through that maze of nets. But there's a regulation that they had to have an opening every third net. They had to have an opening where a boat could get through, and they had to have it well marked with something.
You know, in the Chesapeake 10 years ago, there were still a number of pound netters up there who had continuously pound netted throughout that time period. So I think it was going down at that time. It was going out. I don't know if there's still. I think there's probably still some, but it was already diminishing, declining.
It clutters, pound netting clutters the area. I realize that. Those stakes are a nuisance out there, but it's something you've got to have. So what do? You put a stake there that tends to break off, or you put the more modern, like some people use, PVC pipes for the nets. But I don't know which is what.
Using PVC pipes instead of the stakes?
Yeah, the wood stakes.
Wow, that's
these stakes only last. A stake costs you about $3, $3.50 each, and a PVC that has to be replaced every year. You see.
Interesting.
And a PVC pipe will probably cost you $10 for that piece of pipe. But that pipe will last you probably 10 years. Interesting.
Wow, that's a new development. I'm interested
and
to
there's
hear
just
that.
a few of them using that. The one thing we're having when you tie a hitch on a wood stake, it stays where you put it. You tie it on PVC, it'll slip up.
Exactly.
It's so slick. They're having difficulty with that now.
Yeah, interesting. Now, what other traditions should the museum exhibit?
Well, it'd be hard to exhibit a guy clamming. I guess you could put something like that out there, but we have two ways of clamming in the summer. The hand clamming, you do it by stomping. Some of you people get down and they literally stomp their feet. Well, these people on Hargreaves Island are the best in the world at it. They can get clam, but then the people down at Cedar Island use clam rakes. They make rakes out of table knives.
No, do people here hand clam the way they do? There's a woman that I've been interviewing in South Onslow who hand clams. So she uses her fingers to work the bottom.
Yeah, well, none of them. Now, some of those Hargreaves Island people probably does that too. But they stomp or they get there and hand clam. I know them to do it. You got to have real muddy bottom to do that well.
Right.
And like here in Ward's Creek and North River, they do some hand clamming. But most of the clamming goes on the eastern part of Core Sound. It's done with rakes, clam rakes. And then in the wintertime, they have a clamming that I don't really like that. They kick them out with the propellers. They have a big, heavy thing. It amounts to a dredge, which is not a dredge, it's a net, but it's loaded with, this darn thing is loaded with chains and so much lead on the bottom of it, and then it's got a steel cage back of it that'll weigh 500-600 pounds. And they put troll doors on each side of the boat, you know, to slow it down and keep that mess open. And then they have those big diesel engines.
So you were saying that a man's got to make a living.
Yeah, he's got to make a living, and in the wintertime, that's about all there is to fall back on.
Yeah. What about beyond fishing? What traditions should the museum be sure to include?
Well, they have some good carpenters in this area, and the boat building is about gone. Some of the most beautiful wood boats ever built was built here on Harker's Island. These people are, I doubt that the old-time boat builder on Harker's Island could read any part of a blueprint. The blueprint, you go tell a man what kind of boat you wanted, and he'd draw it out on a piece of board. You get a little piece of that juniper. It's a white cedar they use to make them out of. Juniper, you've heard of it now.
Right.
And you take and draw out, tell him what you want, he'll build you a boat. And they build them with that bow, that flower bow.
Right.
Every one of those woods, all that wood fitted in is so beautiful. Nobody in the world could build boats like those people could. But it's a tradition that's no longer kept. I don't know of anybody that builds wood boats anymore.
I thought I saw somebody doing some work down there.
The Willis boy down, let's see. Yeah, right around that curve there. He's got a boathouse there. I believe he's building.
Right, yeah. So boat building would be important. Other
traditions? I think that is a very important thing for that's, the people used to build their own boats down here. All the boats were home built. And the boat was built, the way they were built was, the reason there's so many different types of boats, because the boat was, you had to have the boat that would do the job. Like the pound-net skiff, it was an ungainly looking thing, but it had to be that type of boat for to do the job. First of all, you got to have something. Down where I live, it had to be the old time. That was different than a modern pound-net now. Now they have an outboard motor hung on the stern of this thing, but back then they had little engines that had a flywheel that weighed more than the engine did. A little pop, pop, pop. You ever see them type engines? It was something that would run half a day on a gallon of gasoline. It was very, very cheap running, but it had very little power, and it was dependable until one of them got contrary a little bit. Like you had dry-cell batteries packs on the thing, and the timer system. You think a damp day like this, sometimes that thing just wouldn't want to start. It wouldn't want to run. But usually it was a very dependable, but a very slow engine. But the boat, first of all, had to be shallow draft, and so that created a lot of tuck in the stern. You understand? It had to be shallow draft, and it had to be the sides. You didn't want them too high because you had to lift that mess of net sufficient, and yet you had to have enough width to carry your weight. You had to be able to carry your.
Do you think there'd be some way with the exhibit or an exhibit on boat building to show the different ways in which boats were tailored for the type of fishing?
Yeah, I think they could do that. Yeah, I think
any particular ideas of how that could be shown?
Well, you had, like I say, you had that was your pound-net skiff. Your mullet skiff, back when I was a young man, that was like traditionally a mullet skiff, a 16-foot skiff, and it was a pole skiff. We didn't, you know how to pole a boat?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we had to pole these boats, and a man would have like no more than 150 yards of net on the stern of that boat, and these nets were handmade. We used to sit there at nights instead of we kids were fussing. We sit there and sing and tie net, make our own nets. Had a little peg there called a mash board. It was made the size of the mash, and one of those would take the skeins of twine, make a ball out of it. Then the other one would sit there and fill the needles off of the ball. Then another one would be tying net. And if we didn't tie but a couple of yards a night. So at the end of
net mending and net making situations.
Yeah, we had.
Should those be featured?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be definitely a part of it. But we made our own nets and everything, but that mullet skiff. Getting back to that, this twine, this linen. It's called linen thread, and you couldn't leave it out. Like if you went fishing, when you come in from fishing, so mullet fishing was done mostly at night back in those days, and then they'd pole all night long, stand there and pole. And the only thing that boat had in it was a pole and oar. You usually have two. They one for deeper water, and usually about a 10-foot oar. Most of the time, what you use down there.
About a
10 feet long oar.
10-foot long oar.
10-foot long oar for poling, and you had that baler that was handmade scoop for the bail of the boat, and that was about everything you had, except a jug of water. Always the jug of water. When I was younger, there were spoon jugs. I don't know where they come from, but later we used glass jugs. But always had that jug of water. Man never leave shore without that.
So,
and his anchor, and that was it.
Should all of that be included in an exhibit?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's, like I say, that did the mullet fishing thing. Then you got your pound net skiff, which was, like I described before, she was 21 feet long, with the little engine, the little old pop engine in it, and that thing had to be shallow draft naturally, but it had to be able to carry a load. And they were good in ways. They had some dead rise in them. The mullet fishing skiff was a flat bottom skiff, mind you, but the pound net skiff had some dead rise in it in the bottom of it, forward. And then you come to the larger boat, your shrimp boat. Back when I first started shrimping, we lived on the boat. Like 2 men would go, and we pulled the net in by hand. Then we got that where we had the winding rig, we had a
winch?
Well, no, not a winch. We had a, what am I going to call it?
Is it like a donkey rig?
No, it had a wooden, I can't say the word.
That's okay, it'll come back to you. Yeah.
Well, anyhow, and we'd take and wrap 2 or 3 wraps around that and pull it up.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It would be a way to sort of leverage it so you could pull on the line harder.
No, it was a turning. What they had it geared to the engine.
I think that was called like a donkey winch. Well, that's what it
might
was called
be,
in the
but
Chesapeake.
we'd take 2 or 3 wraps of our shrimp lines around there, and it pull it. They let that thing pull the net in.
And it was rigged to the engine to give it power, right? They had a comparable thing up there.
I can't. Sort of windlass thing. But anyhow, we come up with that, and then eventually they come up with the big winches. Everybody's got them where one man can operate. Right. But back then, you had to have that on the boat, and the boat had to be where you could live on it. You had to have your bunks on there. You had to have your stove where you could cook. You had to have your drinking water, everything. Right. And you'd go out and stay, usually prepared to go out a week. You'd get your food for a week going there. And it's not that way anymore. Most of them don't stay out a week, unless they're on one of the huge trawlers. Right. Then you had your rum boat, which they called someone called it a rum boat, some of the buy boat. That's the boat that would go out to the long haulers or to the isolated places like it was out on Cedar Island or the Ocracoke and bring the fish from there to Atlantic to the seafood wholesale company.
Now, what time period are you talking about here, roughly?
Well, now they still have the rum boats.
Yeah.
They still have these rum boats. But they're bigger than the ones I used to run. One I used to run was a 40-foot boat. And but you go out and you lived on that. Because, I mean, you had to, like the run from, can you imagine running from Hatteras to Atlantic? Wow. 6 hours each way. Yeah. And I know old man that run that for years and years. Wow. 6 hours each way. God, he put some hours on that.
How important would it be to include the stories of people who did the run boats?
Well, he was an important part on there because he had to, I mean, those fish had to get the market. And I've been to Ocracoke and got loads of shrimp. Have so many shrimp living on that boat, have them piled on the outside, the boxes of shrimp, and come in. I go down and load it up that night.
What was that last part? I missed that.
I'd go to Overcoat and get loads of shrimp.
Yeah.
And we would load the shrimp on the boat about dark. They'd be iced down real good and everything. And there'd be a square dance up there, so I wanted to go to the square dance. And this friend and I, he had a girlfriend down there, and he'd go down on Saturday and come back Saturday night with me. Saturday night with me. After the square dance, we'd leave and come to Atlantic. It'd take about 3.5 hours. And I can see Mr. Clayton Falcher now. He wore one of these white hats, sort of a corn hat, you know. He wasn't a fat man, he was a tall man, you know, and just, he'd be walking that dock, you know. I could see when I was coming in, all the lights on. Yeah. Here it is Sunday morning, like 4 o'clock Sunday morning, and I'd come in there, and here this boat just awash, the water washing over the sides of it, so many shrimp on there. He looked down at me, he said, "Boy, you're going to get drowned. You're going to get drowned." I said, "I'm not going to get drowned." He said, "You are." He said, "You are down that sound with this boat loaded at night. You're going to get drowned." He said, "What am I going to tell Arlie?" That was my dad, Arlie Dan. He said, "What am I going to tell Arlie when this happened?" I said, "Just tell him that I got drowned, I guess." I said, "But look, where you find that mast of that boat, you're going to find me hung to it." He shake his head, then he give me a $20 tip for going down there. He thought the world of me, but I know I was an aggravation to him because I should have got the shrimp and come on in, you know. But I had to have a little bit of spice in life. That was,
right.
That was a rum boat. Now then, another boat now that we haven't talked much about is the long haul boat. Now Atlantic Harbor had at least, I'd say there was at least a dozen crews of long haulers. And a long haul crew consists of 6 men, 3 men on each boat. These were boats that had cabins on them, but they were open. The old long haul, I'm talking about the one back in the 40s, pre-40s. It was a boat that was usually about 35, 38 feet long. It was, it had a cabin forward where the men could stay in there, and the back of it was not decked over. It was just an open hull boat back there. And they had a long pole there, a slender pole in that boat, that in the boat itself. And he would, when they were tugging on this net, one guy would stand there with this pole, and he could tell about how fast you're moving it. If you pull too fast, you pull your net in two, or you could tell if the tide had you, or if you were hung, it's something that snagged your net. So they always had that pole. He wasn't poling the boat, but he just held it to see what forward movement he had. Now, besides this boat, they had each one of they had took 2 of these boats for a whole net rigging. Well, they also had 2 more boats. Each boat had like a 21 or 22 foot boat that they kept their nets in. They called that a haul net skiff. They called that a skiff. It didn't have, it's sort of a semi-V bottom. It wasn't flat bottom. It had some good drives in it, but it had a lot of tuck in the stern of that, but it didn't have any motor in it. But that was strictly for holding net. Each side of that, each one of those boats held about a half mile of net. Wow. And it was a good deep net. It was probably stem bottom, probably 10 feet of water in it. It was deep. And it was coarse threaded, and except the part where they have what they call a back net and a wing net, and then a bunt net. So they had different nets in the grouping on the boat. So when they were tugging them in like that, they had a staff out on one end of the net. What they do, these 2 boats would go out in the water, and they meet out there. Well, these guys in the skiff, you have 2 guys in each haul net skiff. They get turned just like they say they're going to haul from here to there. Right. They come along, they hook those nets, staffs together, they lash them together, those big long poles on the nets, drop it overboard, and then one boat would go this way, one this way. Go off in a semicircle, go off like that, and then they start tugging for if they had a definite goal over there where they were going. They used where they were going to this shallow area, because they had to get overboard to be able to fish it. They had to have like waist deep water was ideal for it. So they'd pull like that and tug until they got those nets to the, when they come to the shoal, start coming to the shoal, then they start coming together. One of these whole skiffs would go and he'd stick an iron post. They call it the augie post. Now, I don't know what the augie post, I don't know why, but this was an iron post, galvanized, piece of galvanized pipe, about 2.5-inch galvanized pipe, and it had wood plugs driven in the end, one of them sharpened off, and they would put that thing, work that thing in the bottom, and they would come, and when the nets come together, they'd tie it there. Each one of those nets, they'd tie it there. Then he'd go out, each boat would go back out, and like if you had 300 yards of net, he'd go back out about 300 yards, and come up alongside, and he would get the end of, they'd have a buoy is a floating where they was tied together, and there'd be a staff there. He'd come around, he'd untie that, get a hold of that other staff and pull it. These guys in the meantime would start pulling the net in. As he kept tugging that other net, these guys would pull the net that was just laying there. They'd go and drug in, pull that in the boat. So that's what they did. That's what they called cutting out the net. And then they had a net in there called the bunk net. That was a real coarse, finer mesh net, maybe an inch mesh, but it was real coarse twine, and it was real heavily leaded and real heavily corked. And that's where the final, and it was very deep, like probably 15 feet deep. And that was the last piece of net to come by. And that come by, that staff, you just leave a little pool of fish there, you know, and then you take that staff and lay it up on that run boat. The run boat then would come alongside, put that staff up there and lash it on the side of the run boat, and then you'd have the corks up front and the lids up back, and your fish all down between. Then you start bailing the fish. Keep pulling the net up in the whole net skiff, you know, keep pulling it till you harden it up till you get the fish. You didn't want them to get too solid in there, because you couldn't bail them. Right. Somebody standing there. That's where my job come in then. Decided running the boat and start hoisting fish. And the basket had a wire basket, and one guy, usually the captain of one of the boats, would be in there dumping the fish. He'd dump them and throw the ice. We always had plenty of ice in there. Throw the ice on them.
And what time period would this have been that you were doing this?
This was in the summertime. They still do it.
No, but I mean year. What year was this?
I was doing it in 1948, 1949.
And when was that? When did that go out?
It hasn't gone out. They still long haul. Yeah,
wow.
they still long haul. Yeah.
Really?
Yes, there's still a few crews of them doing that.
Huh. Yeah. And where are those crews out of?
Atlantic.
Huh.
I don't know if anybody hauling except for people to Atlantic. Jonathan Robinson down there, and
what were those names again?
Jonathan Robinson and Buster Salter. And let's see, by golly, it seems there should be somebody else, but I don't know. But I know there's two that should be.
Huh, interesting.
Oh yeah, Danny Mason.
It seems like that would be important too, because that's gone on here for...
Oh yes, that's a very, very important fishery, and it's a very interesting thing. Yeah. And you have those guys, now they, like I say, there's 3 people, and they sleep on those boats. Back when I was hauling, they go down, they haul traditionally down around Wallace's Channel, not in Wallace's Channel, but off there, a place called Royal Shoal, between Portsmouth and Oakley, out in Pimlico Sound. The whole Royal Shoal and Schooner Shoal, they call it, and then around Portsmouth Island, and then sometimes they go around Point of Marsh, around the mouth of Neuse River. They had like a dozen or so crews doing that back when I was doing that, running this boat, and they would draw straws to see who would haul such and such a place. There was no argument among the fishermen, because they determined on the weekend they go there. Sometime after they come in, they go down and draw the straws to see which one would haul where, and on what day, you know. Right. I mean, you might haul this place a day, but those places were continuously being hauled. Now, that was another thing I was trying to tell you about the nets. Those nets, when you quit fishing, those nets were were washed down in lime water. You take lime and put it in there, and it served two purposes. Well, number one, I think, was a preservative, and of course they got some of that fish scent out of that too. It cleaned your boat. That lime helped clean your boat as well as clean your nets. But they had to be limed and then covered. More recently, since they come out with this different type net, you had to keep them covered because the sun will rot that nylon.
You had to dip it. It's somewhere along the line, right?
They do dip those nets. They have a preservative they put some in. But back when I was a kid, the way they did it, they had those linen nets, and that net had to be spreaded. They had long poles put up. They had some poles in the ground and then some poles tied to them, and they go around. They'd hang that net on there
to dry it.
To dry it.
To dry it.
That net had to be dried because it would rot. And then
and when you're saying linen, are you meaaning cotton nets?
That was cotton.
Basically?
That was cotton nets, but they don't have them anymore. Then they come out with the nylon nets, and then of course the monofilament. But
let me ask you this: beyond fishing and boat building, what other traditions should the museum feature?
Well, I don't really know. Right now, things have started getting more tourist-oriented down here than it was when I was a kid.
What about things like music, storytelling?
Well, the music thing...
Model boat building.
Yeah. The music thing was... I think that the people in here loved country music. That was about all we heard. And like when I was a real small child, my uncle got a radio, and we'd go up there and listen to the Grand Ole Opry. When you could hear it, there was very few nights that you could get it without having a lot of static, you know. You don't know what static is on radio, do you? Well,
no, I do. I get it on mine.
But anyhow, you could get there, and I remember we'd have to sit just as still, you know, and listen and hear Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl, all these people back, and they were our heroes back then when I was a child, and that's why I become interested in playing. The first guy that, well, the best guitar player we had around Cedar Island was a boy named Leonard Goodwin. Leonard learned to play a guitar on his own. I mean, his brother bought a guitar there, and probably bought a little sheet of paper, showed the chords. I'm not sure about that. I don't know how certainly he saw something to learn those chords. But Leonard had a bad speech impediment. He stuttered the words of anybody I've ever seen when he was a kid. He had the first stuttering problem of anyone, and he could sing as pretty as anybody you've ever heard. He never missed a word in singing. Now, I had an incident when I was in the Air Force. I used to play some with a guy over on Okinawa named Mel Tillis. You ever heard of Mel Tillis, the guy that stutters? Well, he was a baker and I was a cook over there, and we used to play together. And I wondered how that guy got in the Air Force, because he stuttered. And I just didn't see how he could get in the Air Force like that. But Leonard stuttered much, much worse than him. But now Leonard has overcome a lot of that because I don't know if he went to therapy or what, but in recent years he's got where he can talk better. Leonard is probably 75 years old now. But he could play, he could really play a guitar and sing the prettiest. Mel Tillis told me that he went to therapy and he got away from it because he can talk to you just like you and I sitting here talking, but he has to include that stuttering to make his make it interesting. You know, that was his trademark, old stuttering Mel. But we had a guy in Atlantic named Roby Fulcher. Roby was an old-time fiddler, and he was a good fiddler, very good. And I've heard, depends on where you are, who's the best fiddler. We have one on Harker's Island named Ivy Gray Scott. And Ivy Scott was a little old man there, but he could play a fiddle, and he was really good at it. And I don't know, you go to Atlantic and everybody says Roby was the best fiddler. You come down here and people on here tell you that Ivy Scott was the best fiddler ever. Both of them were good.
How important would it be to feature music? How central has that been in Down East?
I don't know. I know that Connie Mason, have you ever met Connie Mason?
I interviewed her on the project.
Okay, well, Connie and I played together a whole lot.
Great.
Yeah. Connie used to be employed by the Park Service, and their office was on Front Street in Beaufort, right across from where the Michael Smith Memorial is. Every Tuesday night in the summer, we had a music program there for 1 hour. It was Connie and an old man from Moorhead named Bob Scott played the fiddle. We had an old man from Atlantic played a guitar named Makeley Salter, and it was Connie Mason and playing the banjo, and I was playing the dobro guitar. And we had a program, 1 hour program every Tuesday night, and they had that street shut off. You know where you go in, have you been down there on the waterfront?
Yeah.
Well, all that where that parking area is in there, they would shut it off on Tuesday evening, and the people would just stand, lots of people. Yes,
great.
You see people coming walking all over town like that, just walking down, and then some cars come there and just play. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We did that for, I know we did it 2 years, and I don't know if we did it longer. And
now, how long have you been playing dobro?
It's an interesting story. I got that my first guitar. My brother bought it for me when I was 12 years old, 1940. He bought me a little guitar, had a cowboy on a horse and a cactus bush sitting on it. I think he gave $3.50 for it. My company, well, no, that was a beautiful sounding little guitar. I'd sit there and I'd try to play it. I was, like I said, a small guy. I didn't have the strength for the fret the guitar good. I'd sit there and I just didn't get it fretted right. It didn't sound good at all. And one day I was sitting on the wood pile out back of the house, and I was there and I was making my best noise, you know. And here walks a guy up. He's an acquaintance of mine from Moorhead. I didn't know he played the guitar. He said, "Boy, let me show you how to play that thing." So he takes the guitar and he starts to turn the tuners. I said, don't turn them. I said, Leonard is the only one who knows how to tune this. And he said, don't let anybody touch those tuners. He said, well, I can tune it back for you. He went there and he messed my guitar up real good, I thought. And he went there and he changed all the tuning, and he took his pocket knife out and he starts playing. I could not believe it. Good gosh, man. So I didn't have a pocket knife, but I go to take my mama's scissors from use. And I just kept trying, and I played for a long time, trying to play until it took me about 40, 50 years to convince myself that I couldn't play, but I still enjoyed doing it.
That's great. And what kind of music do you do mostly?
It's mostly country and western, gospel, stuff like that. I like bluegrass. I like any kind of music except opera. I don't understand opera, but I probably would like it if I would try real hard. But
now, what about your model boat building? You showed me a couple models in your car.
Well, I started out building model airplanes out of corn cobs when I was a little kid, and of course that was the main toy that we had when I was a child, walking along the edge of the shore there, pulling a little boat. It didn't matter if it was just a piece of board with a nail goes in it. As you're booting, pull that boat along, you know, you're really doing something. So as I got older, I just wanted to make some boats, and I wanted some models of the boat that my dad used to run, old Genevieve, and
you wanted some models of some of the
boats
your father had run?
Yeah, I wanted something so that my children know what they look. I try to leave things from I want my children and grandkids to know something about the heritage. And I've written, what I'm telling you here, I've written a lot of stuff that's found this far forward now.
So you've written down a lot?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What have you done with what you've written down?
Well, I had a friend, my best buddy at Cherry Point's daughter was she worked for the Carteret County News Times.
So wait, who worked for the Carteret County?
My friend's daughter, and he had seen some of my writings, and he mentioned it to her, and she wanted to know if she could get it for putting in News Times. So she did, and it was in the headline in the front page paper, picture of me with my dobro and some of my stories from right on back growing. It's called Growing Up on Cedar Island, and they put this. I don't know how many times it's included in there, several times in that Carteret County newspaper. But anyhow, I gave her all those things, and there's some of it still around my house. Just sort of my kids can find it if they want it, but I have all that stuff there for them. And so I made the boats so that they would know what these things look like. You can describe it, but you can't look at it. And I want them to see what those boats were like. And little tugboats, I worked for a while on a boat up north for a dredging company up there, so I knew a little bit about what they would look like. And I can do a whole lot better building something by looking at it than I can with a blueprint.
Than you can from a blueprint?
Yeah, I don't care anything about blueprints. I like to just look at something, get a general idea of what it's like, and if I get there and you probably see me sitting there studying the doggone thing forever,
and just
I'll
eyeball
go home and make it.
Go home and make it? Yeah.
Just like the big sailboat. I have a big sailboat I'm making now. It'll be over 5 feet long.
Wow, great.
And,
how many models have you built over the years?
I've given so many and give them away. I've never sold a boat in my life. I do it for fun, and I have a lot of people I know. I just give them a boat. Somebody comes to my house and suddenly I was on the boat, and that's the way it's always been. And I say in recent years, I've done it more recently since I retired from Cherry Point. Since 1985, I've been trying to do these things. But my boats don't measure up to what James Rose. James Rose can go down. The difference in his boats and mine, I think James makes his boats. He cuts the sides and everything. Mine are carved.
You carve yours?
Mine are carved, except for the detail stuff I put on. I use Tupelo, the same stuff they make these decoys out of. And I enjoy doing that. Not all of them are pretty, and not all the boats are pretty. Those Menhaden boats, that wasn't a pretty boat to start with. I think I probably did all right on them, because made them probably prettier than the real boat is.
I think that one's beautiful.
Have you ever seen the one in Delaware, alongside the road, down at Highway 13? Did you ever go to Highway 13?
I don't know that I have. I don't think so.
Well, they have one of them. It's a restaurant. They made a big restaurant. Clean up, like you're taking that Highway 13, let's go to Norfolk, go close to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, and go over, like you're going up Dover, Delaware. Place up there. They have one of those big Menhaden boats that's pulled up there. She used to fish down here this area, and made a big restaurant out of it.
I'll have to look for it.
Called the Flagship Restaurant. It's on the left going up.
Flagship?
The Flagship Restaurant.
Flagship.
Yes. I forget what the name of the place. I stopped there and made some pictures of it, because I said, this will give me some. I knew what they looked like, but I wanted to see what the shear it had on everything. And I got out there making pictures, and when I walked in, the girl said, I saw you making pictures. I said, yeah, I'm making a model.
Are you making a model of it, or have you?
No, I use that as something.
As a model.
The pictures I made, so I can, from time to time, see just how everything, I knew the things was on it, but in relation to the distance from here to here, and how, like from the front cabin to the back, how high is the
How
cabin.
to keep it in scale?
Yeah, try to keep it as near scale as you could without going by a blueprint.
So you've made Menhaden boats, sailing skiffs?
No sailing
I
ship.
thought you said something about a sailboat.
A sailing ship, yeah.
You made a sailing ship?
Yeah, I have two there. I have one that's a rounded bottom, and one that's sort of a straight, the big one's sort of a straight-sided. I started to make this thing to put it in the yard. I said I want to make it and put me some shells down and some landscape timbers and put this boat in. That's the idea of making the doggone thing. And I got started and got so involved in it, put so much detail in it. And my friends come along, they say, "Man, you're not putting that in the yard." I said, "Yeah, no, you can't put that in the yard. You can't do that." So that's the reason the boat is probably 2 years for completion. Takes a lot of time to drill that detail. All those rails. Oh my gosh, I have so many handrails around that thing, and I got a lot of detail in it. Made it all. Handmade.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the tape here.
Okay. Well,
is there more that you can suggest to the museum about either types of exhibits or the role it should play in the community?
well, I think it's a good thing what they're doing here. They have some really good people that's put a lot of time into it, a lot of money in it, and the volunteers are so many of them volunteer for it. Even though I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't put the time in it because I lead a pretty busy life it is, and I'm not much of a joiner. I don't join any clubs or anything like that. I don't. So but anyhow, I think what they're doing is a good thing, and I'd like to see, like I say, some boat displays and things like that. Now, that's part of the heritage of this area, as well as hunting. Now, the hunting was an important part of it because they hunted for money back then. Some of them even sold fowl way back there before my time. But I know the waterfowl meant a lot to us for having something to eat, put meat on the table that we didn't have. No refrigeration, everything. You can imagine how it was done. Either meat out of a salt barrel or something fresh like that.
What do you think, if there were just 3 exhibits in the museum, what should it be of?
Well, waterfowl and maybe fishing and boat building.
Right there. Okay.
That would pretty well cover it.
That would. What about what the museum can do in the community long term? What role do you think it can play?
Well, it can bring a lot of tourists in, a lot of people to come see it. As far as getting large enough to employ a lot of people, I don't know about that, but it could definitely bring in a lot of tourist dollars. That's the big thing I see. And the main thing, it could keep the whole purpose of it, as I understand it, was heritage. They wanted people to know about this area. Now, your boat builders, something I failed to tell you, the man that built most of the bigger boats, like the hull net boats and the rim boats, was a man called Ambrose Fulcher. They called him Ambers in this area, but his name is Ambrose Fulcher. At Atlantic, he built most of the boats down east. Mr. Leslie Hamilton, he also built some boats down east. But your main boat builders were guys that built the beautiful boats, and those are the Harkers Islanders. Our boats were not. Our boats were made for service, not for beauty. They were not made for speed. The Harkers Island boats back then would run probably 20, with a Chrysler engine, it probably run 20, 25 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour. Our boats down there that were built for hull netting and stuff like that had the same engine in it, would probably run 8 miles an hour.
So I wonder if they could do an exhibit that featured some of the different boats from
Yeah,
different
I think
areas.
that would be. I think that would be the important thing, to put not just one type boat, but the type boats. Like I hear my people talking about people that had a cunner, a boat called a cunner. Have you ever heard of a cunner? I've never heard of a real description of what a cunner is. Some had some of them called it a cutter, some of them called it a cunner. Some of them had a boat called a bateau I'm talking about in my grandfather's days. I never saw any of these boats. I don't know what they are. They had all the trade carried on in the eastern Carteret County was 5 boats. There was no roads here. The road was built from Beaufort to Atlantic in 1920, It was paved in 1928, and then they built a dirt road over to Cedar Island in 1928. So they didn't have any roads down here. So all the trade was carried on. All the trade was carried on with boats. These people had what they call freight boats, and they go to Washington or Belhaven, Newbern, Elizabeth City, or somewhere like that, and get provisions. They would, and they used a barter system. From what my dad said, the barter system they used a lot. They'd send like oysters, baskets of oysters, or salt, mullet, things like that. And in turn, this freight boat would go there, and the farmers would trade corn and pork, salt pork, things like that for them. They bring back. And if the woman wanted you dress something, she'd send and get a bolt of cloth.
Right.
So this guy, usually this guy that ran this boat had a little store, had a little country store, and so he had some provisions in there. And but that was strictly the way it was. Get to a doctor from Cedar Island. You're talking about if the wind was out of the northeast, you'd get to the doctor, probably sail down there in one day. If the wind was out of the southwest, you might be 2 or 3 days.
So people were pretty dependent on their watercraft for.
It was the only way you could go. There was no road transportation.
Yeah.
There was no roads.
So it sounds like boat building would be that third room from what you said.
I think so.
Is there anything more that you would want the museum to know about what the museum should do or be for the community?
I think it's
You talked about its heritage.
doing good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, like it is. I think they got some good people on there. It's,
Any way to involve local community members that you would recommend?
I think with the volunteers they got, that they're doing a good job.
How about people coming to demonstrate at the museum or share their tradition?
They do that. They let them do that. Yeah, they have these decoy festivals, and they let people come from everywhere and show their decoys. That's mostly decoys. I don't think they have boat shows and stuff. So.
What about for people who aren't decoy carvers? Is there a way for other traditional artists to be involved?
It should be, but I don't know that there is.
Well, what about model boat builders?
That's what I say. I think
James Allen Rose talked about he could, come and greet people or show his boat
Yes, he
building.
could.
What about you? Would you ever be interested in that?
I don't sell any boats, but I'd be willing to let them see my boats, But I'm kind of proud of them. But as far as selling them, James Allen does it for a living.
Well, I know lots of people that I talked to in Maine who made model boats, and some of them didn't sell them. Sometimes it's just for keepsakes.
I put too much love in that thing. I go down. I don't want to sell it. I just don't want anybody.
Yeah.
I want it. It's like my friend has a pig picking twice a year over in Davis. We go down there and one of the guys at the western part of the state comes down and has got a furniture factory. He makes chair frames and makes the frames for chairs and sofas, and he uses a lot of poplar wood. And he brings the ends of those pieces of wood. It's planed, real nice, finished from the side, but it has no paint or anything, but it's planed down real nice and smooth like. And he brings some pieces of wood down from a friend to use in his stove. He has a wood stove out in his shop there, and all these people come down and I take a pin, burning pin, and make these sailboats.
So you do some wood burning?
Oh yeah, they sailing ships. Yeah, I love to draw. And I make these burn those sailing ships in there. Those people go nuts over them doggone.
Neat, that's
burn
great.
them in, burn them like them old galleons and things like this. I love to make them, those spare riggers.
Yeah.
And I can make one of them in 5 minutes, and sign it and let them have it. They just tip it to death.
Yeah, why do you make model boats?
Huh?
Why do you make model boats?
Fun. Now my daughter is a great. She's very talented lady.
Tracy said you.
Okay.
She's very talented, and she makes things for gift shops.
Yeah.
And I make little boats for her about this long, and they use them for Christmas tree decoration. Little shrimp boats,
Right.
about that long, and decorate them up and put
Huh.
gold
great.
rigging in them, you know,
Yeah.
the lines like a gold like, and then she put a pretty bow on them, put a green net on them, paint it white, and ribbed on them, everything, and hang them on the Christmas tree, ornament for Christmas tree on it. And then I make her lighthouses, miniature lighthouses. She puts them into clear Christmas tree bulbs. The clear bulb, she put a little bit, she'll glue that miniature lighthouse in, then put a little sand in there and everything, and put a bow, real pretty bow on it, hanging out. And I do a lot of them for her.
Neat.
But I have 100 of them little boats, anywhere from that long to about that long now. And I just went there the other day, just cut them out and sand them, smooth them, put the cabins on them, and they're just sitting there, and directly we'll get together and we'll get there and
What was that last part? I missed that.
we'll get together.
Get together. Yeah.
And I make the windows out of this, vinyl.
Yeah.
Stick on vinyl, like to cut the windows out, and because you had to use tweezers and some tedious.
Fun. That's great. Good. Well, you know, some people have talked about that the boats remind them of different parts of their history or their family's history. Do the model boats serve that function for you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Or is it
like I
mostly
tell
the
you,
fun of it?
The things that I love about down here,
Yeah.
and I can visualize these the people back those days on them boats and everything. There's one boat that I never did make is a sprit sailboat. James Rose makes a lot of them. They're pretty.
Maybe it's time for you to make one.
Well, like I tell you, I carve them, so it's hard to make a
Right.
open hull boat when you're
Right.
carving it. You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah. Exactly.